My name is Avery Collins, and I was 29 when my father banned me from my grandfather's funeral because I delivered pizzas at night. He called while I was eating lunch in the stained glass restoration workshop where I worked during the day. I answered because I expected funeral details. Instead, he shouted, "Don't you dare show up tomorrow." When I asked why, he said Grandpa's friends were doctors, judges, architects, and business owners, while I drove around carrying pizza boxes. He demanded to know what he was supposed to tell them, before I could respond. My mother grabbed the phone and said they had already told everyone I was working overseas because the lie was less embarrassing than the truth. Then came their deal. If I wanted them to acknowledge that I existed, I had 24 hours to pay $20,000 for the funeral and another $16,000 for the headstone. When I said I did not have $36,000, several people in the room laughed. My mother added that they had emptied my childhood bedroom and donated everything, including the wooden chest Grandpa had built for me. Then the call ended. I did not cry. I opened the last message Grandpa had sent me 3 weeks earlier. It contained a photograph of a stained glass panel and 6 words. The blue bird protects the truth. 10 hours later at 2 o'clock in the morning, my parents, my uncle, and 2 strangers were outside my apartment building pounding on the doors and screaming my name. They were no longer embarrassed to admit I existed. They were terrified of what I had discovered. Before I tell you what Grandpa hid inside that blue bird and why my entire family came begging in the middle of the night, tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? I want to know how far Avery's story travels tonight. People heard the words pizza delivery and assumed they understood my life. My parents encouraged that assumption for years. What they never mentioned was that delivery was my second job, during the day. I worked as a junior restoration technician at Hartwell Glassworks in Pittsburgh, repairing stained glass windows from churches, theaters, libraries, and historic homes. The work required chemistry, precision, drawing skills, and patience. I removed corrosion from lead joints, matched pigments no longer manufactured, and rebuilt damaged panels without erasing the original artist's hand. The pay was modest because I was completing a specialist apprenticeship. So 3 nights a week, I delivered pizzas to cover rent and buy tools. I was ashamed of neither job. Honest work had never embarrassed me. Dishonest people did. My grandfather, Walter Collins, was the only person in my family who understood. He had spent 44 years designing decorative glass for public buildings across western Pennsylvania. When I was a child, he let me sit beside him at his drafting table and taught me that broken glass was not worthless. A crack became part of its history, but careful hands could keep it from spreading. When I left the business degree my father had chosen and transferred into architectural conservation, Grandpa gave me his tracing tools. My father called the decision humiliating. Grandpa called it honest. After the phone call, I drove to Noah Bennett's office. Noah and I had grown up on the same street, but he was more than a supportive childhood friend. 5 years earlier, his mother had hired my father's property company to manage an inherited duplex. Thousands in rent vanished through forged maintenance invoices. She lacked enough evidence to sue, but Noah became a probate and property attorney partly because of what happened. He replayed the recording of my father demanding $36,000. I had recorded it automatically because my delivery app archived business calls. When the laughter came through the speakers, Noah stopped the audio. "Who else was there?" he asked. I had heard my uncle and perhaps the funeral director. Then Noah asked why my mother had mentioned my childhood belongings. I told him about the wooden chest and the bluebird medallion in its lid. Grandpa had warned me years earlier never to let my father remove that panel. We drove to the charity warehouse my mother usually used, but the manager had no record of receiving anything from my family. A former neighbor then told me a rented moving van had arrived that morning. Workers had removed furniture, paintings, Grandpa's drafting cabinets, and sealed crates. The van belonged to Keystone Estate Liquidators, a company specializing in private auctions. My parents had not donated my belongings. They were selling them before the funeral. Noah found a private online auction scheduled for midnight. The preview photographs showed my childhood desk, Grandpa's brass tools, the wooden chest, and portfolios of original stained glass designs. Some signed civic commissions were worth tens of thousands of dollars. Public probate records revealed something worse. My father and uncle had filed a petition claiming Grandpa left no significant personal property outside a small bank account. They omitted his workshop, archive, and brick house. 6 weeks before Grandpa died, ownership of the property had supposedly transferred to Collins Heritage Holdings, a new company controlled by them. The document had been notarized on a day when Grandpa was hospitalized after a stroke. The funeral ban was never about pizza. They needed me gone long enough to sell evidence and take control of the estate. I thought about the money they demanded, the lie about my overseas career, and my belongings disappearing before Grandpa was buried. Had they ever seen me as a daughter or only as a problem to erase whenever I stood between them and something they wanted? "I'm going to the funeral," I said. Noah shook his head. "First, we find the bird." Keystone Estate Liquidators operated from an old furniture warehouse near the Monongahela River. Noah informed the owner that several listed items might be part of a probate dispute. The owner initially refused to cooperate, but changed his mind when Noah liability for selling contested property. At 10:38 p.m., we entered under supervision. My possessions were stacked in a concrete bay, marked Lot 114. School photographs were bent beneath kitchen appliances. Books Grandpa had given me were stuffed into garbage bags. My certificates lay inside a broken laundry basket. Seeing those objects did not make me miss my parents' house. It showed me how casually they had tried to erase my life. The wooden chest stood against the wall. Its lock had been forced, but the blue bird remained in the lid. My father saw decoration. I saw a repair line circling the bird's wing, too precise to be accidental, using a thin conservation blade. I loosened the retaining putty and lifted the glass. Beneath it was a shallow compartment containing 3 envelopes, a flash drive, a brass key, and a handwritten note. "Avery," it began. "If you are reading this, Richard or Grant has tried to keep you from my workshop." Grandpa explained that he had discovered unauthorized withdrawals from his retirement account. My father handled some of his bills after the stroke, while my uncle managed the family's former glass supply business and pressured him to transfer the workshop. After Grandpa refused, they presented documents as routine medical forms. He believed they were hiding property transfers among the paperwork. The first envelope contained copies of his actual will and trust amendment. They named me beneficiary of the house, workshop equipment, design archive, and 60% of the trust. My father and uncle were meant to divide the remaining 40%, but a forfeiture clause stated that anyone who concealed, destroyed, transferred, or sold estate property would lose everything. The second envelope contained statements showing withdrawals totaling $184,000. Some transfers went to Collins Heritage Holdings. Others paid credit cards, resort bills, and a luxury vehicle registered to my mother. The third contained a physician's letter confirming that on the date of the alleged deed transfer, Grandpa was sedated in intensive care and physically unable to sign. The flash drive was worse. Grandpa had recorded conversations after becoming suspicious. In one file. My father said the workshop would be wasted on Avery and her little glass hobby. My uncle replied that after transferring the deed, they could sell the property to a hotel developer. My mother asked whether I might contest it. My father laughed and said they would keep me away by making the funeral too expensive to attend. The recording had been made 13 days before Grandpa's death. They had planned the ultimatum while he was still alive. The brass key opened a drawer in Grandpa's drafting cabinet. Inside was a ledger documenting every major design he had produced since 1978, plus ownership certificates for 27 original cartoons. The full-scale drawings used to create stained glass windows. Several had been falsely listed as unsigned decorative sketches. One had been appraised at $42,000. The warehouse owner suspended the auction and contacted his insurer. Noah photographed everything, copied the files, and requested an emergency preservation order. Because the funeral was the next morning, a judge agreed to review the records electronically. At 11:26 p.m., the assets were frozen. At 11:41, the disputed deed was flagged for suspected fraud. At 11:53, the bank holding Collins Heritage Holdings was ordered not to release estate-related funds. Then my phone exploded with calls. My mother called 8 times. My father called 11. My uncle claimed there had been a misunderstanding. At 12:17 a.m., my father's older sister, Vanessa Collins, called. She had served as co-trustee until my father persuaded Grandpa to remove her. She said my parents had warned the family that I was unstable and might disrupt the funeral. They had also claimed I stole money from Grandpa to support an addiction. I sent her one recording. When it ended, she admitted something else. Grandpa had prepaid his funeral 2 years earlier. The $20,000 demand was fabricated. Grandpa had already paid for the service, burial plot, and headstone. My parents intended to collect my money while arranging a cheaper ceremony. The false invoice used a legitimate monument company's letterhead, but directed payment to their private account. At 1:38 a.m., the judge removed my father and uncle as estate representatives and appointed an independent administrator. They were ordered to surrender all keys, records, devices, and property by 9 o'clock that morning. At 1:52, my apartment intercom began buzzing. Through the lobby camera, I saw my parents, my uncle, Vanessa, and 2 men in suits. My mother was striking every button. My father shouted that I had destroyed the funeral. My uncle demanded that I fix the accounts. 10 hours earlier, they had laughed at acknowledging me as family. Now they were screaming my name because they could no longer access Grandpa's money, sell his property, or control his funeral. I looked at Noah. Should I let them up? He closed his laptop. Only if you're ready to hear how people sound when their victim finally has the evidence. I allowed them into the lobby, but not my apartment. The security camera recorded everything, and Noah stood beside me. My father entered first, wearing the navy coat he used for important meetings. He did not ask whether I was grieving or apologize for banning me from the funeral. He pointed at me and said, "Call the bank and withdraw your complaint." Noah replied that it was not a complaint, but an emergency probate filing supported by documents. My uncle called it a family matter. Noah reminded him that forgery stopped being private when it was filed with the county. My mother changed tactics. Her voice softened. "Avery, sweetheart, we were under pressure. Your grandfather left a complicated mess. Your father was protecting the family. I asked why they had sold my possessions. She claimed they thought I did not want them. I reminded her that she had called them donations. My father interrupted, saying there would be no funeral unless the accounts were released. Vanessa revealed that Grandpa had prepaid everything. The funeral director standing behind them looked confused and asked why he had been hired at all. Then I played the recording. My father's voice filled the lobby. "Keep Avery out of the service. Tell her she has to pay. She'll either disappear or send the money." My uncle laughed. My mother asked, "What if she finds the old chest?" My father replied. "Then get rid of it before she arrives." When the audio ended, no one spoke. My father demanded to know where I found it. I said it came from the chest they tried to auction. He claimed the recording was illegal. Noah told him his attorney could argue that later. Their lawyer requested privacy, but I refused. For years, my parents had isolated me during arguments and later denied what they said. This conversation would stay beneath the camera. My uncle blamed my father, claiming the deed transfer was Richard's idea. My father accused Grant of preparing the papers. My mother insisted both men pressured her and that she knew nothing about the forged signature. Within minutes, the family that laughed at me turned against itself. Vanessa added that Grandpa had requested a meeting with an estate investigator 4 days before he died. She ignored him because my father said Grandpa was confused. The investigator had still gathered records and would submit them to the administrator. My father looked at me and asked, "What do you want?" It was not love. It was negotiation. He assumed everyone had a price. I told him I wanted Grandpa buried according to his wishes. Every item returned. The forged deed withdrawn. A full accounting of the trust. And an end to the lies that I stole from Grandpa. My mother said they could arrange that if I released the accounts. I explained that I did not control them. My father told me I had started this. I said Grandpa started documenting it when they began stealing. He warned me to be careful with that word. I stepped closer. You withdrew money from a sick man, filed a deed he could not sign, fabricated funeral costs, and tried to sell his work before he was buried. What word would you prefer? He stared at me with the same contempt he had shown when I left business school. Then he made his final mistake. You owe us. We fed you, housed you, and paid for your childhood. Everything you have came from us. I thought of the belongings in garbage bags, the lies about my career, and their demand that I purchase the right to mourn. Parents do not earn ownership of a child by keeping her alive, I said. And you cannot invoice me for a childhood you just tried to sell. The lawyer and funeral director left. Vanessa apologized, but I told her remorse did not restore what her silence had enabled. She accepted that. My mother whispered, "People will talk." That sentence explained her completely. She was not frightened by what they had done. She was frightened people would know. Yes, I said. Tomorrow they will. Before dawn, I returned to Hartwell Glassworks. I removed the bluebird from the chest and placed it on a light table, along its wing. Grandpa had etched a nearly invisible sentence. A name means nothing without integrity. I repaired the border and mounted the bird in an oak frame beside the first page of his note. I would not scream, destroy property, or invent lies. I would place the truth where everyone my parents wanted to impress could see it. Grandpa's original funeral home restored the prepaid service for 11 that morning. The independent administrator authorized the arrangements and notified the cemetery that no one else could approve changes. My father and uncle could attend, but neither could handle documents, collect donations, remove memorial items, or speak for the estate. I arrived carrying the framed bluebird. I wore a black suit and the silver ruler Grandpa gave me after my first apprenticeship year. My parents stood near the entrance greeting mourners as if nothing had happened. My father introduced himself to a retired judge and began describing Grandpa's carefully managed legacy. The judge glanced toward the estate administrator and walked away. My mother's smile froze when she saw me, but she could not remove me. She approached and whispered, "Everyone is watching," I answered. "They should have been watching sooner." I placed the bird beside Grandpa's photograph and displayed only the first page of his note. It said he trusted me to preserve his work because I understood the difference between protecting a legacy and profiting from it. I did not show bank statements or play recordings. I did not need to. The administrator had already informed the beneficiaries that estate misconduct was under investigation. Grandpa's former colleagues approached me. They did not ask why I delivered pizzas. They asked about my restoration work. A church architect remembered a window I had helped repair. A museum curator recognized my name from a conservation report. One of Grandpa's oldest friends told me Grandpa had proudly shown him photographs of my first completed panel. He said you were the only Collins still willing to learn the craft. My father overheard. The embarrassment he had tried to place on me returned to its owner. The service began. Vanessa delivered a reading without pretending the family was united. Then the funeral director announced that Grandpa had left a written request for one person to speak about his working life. My father rose automatically. "Avery Collins," the director said. My father sat back down. I spoke about glass. Stained glass windows appeared strongest when sunlight passed through them. But their true strength came from the dark lead lines holding different pieces together. Grandpa believed families should work the same way. Difference was not damage, and control was not unity. A family survived when each person could remain distinct without being discarded. I never named my parents. But when I said Grandpa spent his final weeks protecting his work from people who confused inheritance with entitlement, everyone understood. After the burial, the administrator gathered the family to read the will. I inherited the workshop, house, design archive, and 60% of the trust. Vanessa received letters and a smaller financial gift. Several trade schools received scholarships. My father and uncle had originally been assigned the remaining 40% worth about $310,000 each. Then the forfeiture clause was read. Any beneficiary who knowingly concealed property, interfered with the will, falsified ownership documents, or attempted to sell protected assets would be treated as having died before Grandpa. Their share would fund apprenticeships in architectural restoration. Their attorney argued that nothing had been proven. The administrator agreed that a final decision required investigation, but confirmed both shares would remain frozen. The auction records, disputed deed, recordings, false funeral invoice, and transfers had been submitted to the court. My uncle accused my father of forging the deed. My father accused him of stealing from the trust. My mother claimed the recordings were manipulated. Then my cousin, Paige Miller, entered with a company laptop and a folder of emails. She had worked for my father's property company and prepared several transfers he described as legitimate reimbursements. The previous day, he ordered her to delete the files. The emails showed he used company money to pay personal debts, then reimbursed the company from Grandpa's trust. They also revealed that an employee created the fake funeral invoice at my mother's request. The administrator collected the laptop. My father demanded that I tell everyone Paige was lying. At that moment, he understood I was no longer available as his scapegoat. I would not defend him, fund him, hide his fraud, or disappear to save his reputation. "You wanted me gone because I delivered pizzas," I said. But I was never the humiliating part of this family. No one laughed. The investigation lasted 7 months. But my parents' image collapsed almost immediately. The hotel developer withdrew from purchasing Grandpa's property. Collins Heritage Holdings defaulted on a loan my father and uncle had secured against the expected sale. Because they had personally guaranteed it, the lender placed liens on their assets. My father did not lose his career because of funeral gossip. The dispute triggered an audit at the property management company where he served as regional director. Investigators uncovered manipulated vendor invoices, hidden conflicts of interest, and payments to a maintenance company controlled by my uncle. The same method had been used years earlier against Noah's mother. This time, the records survived. My father resigned. But former clients filed a civil claim. Noah's mother finally obtained proof that more than $14,000 had been diverted from her rental income. My parents had spent years assuming ordinary working people were too powerless to challenge them. Now, every person they underestimated became another witness. My uncle's supply business collapsed when its bank suspended credit. He snorts, blamed my father publicly, but emails showed he arranged the false property appraisal and contacted the developer months before Grandpa died. His wife filed for separation after discovering he had pledged their home as collateral without explaining the risk. My mother's friends did not abandon her because I released private recordings. I never made them public. She lost those relationships because she kept lying. She told one group I had manipulated a confused old man, another that Grandpa hated me, and others that no investigation existed. Her contradictions spread until even her closest friends stopped defending her. The criminal case focused on the forged deed, false invoice, and unauthorized withdrawals. My father and uncle accepted plea agreements requiring restitution, probation, community service, financial monitoring, and permanent restrictions on serving as fiduciaries. My mother avoided conviction because prosecutors could not prove she understood every transaction, but she was included in the civil settlement and ordered to repay money connected to the funeral scheme. Their house was sold to satisfy debts and restitution. It was not my childhood home, but a renovated suburban property purchased to impress clients while carrying 3 mortgages and huge credit card balances. They moved into a small rental apartment outside the city. 3 weeks after the settlement, my mother called from an unfamiliar number. She said my father's health was suffering and asked whether I could use Grandpa's trust to help them buy another home. "You received his money," she said. "Family should care for family." I almost admired the confidence. "You demanded $36,000 before allowing me to attend his funeral," I replied. Snorts. "You tried to sell what he left me, and now you want his trust to rescue you from the consequences." She said they had made mistakes. A mistake is sending the wrong invoice. You created a false one. She cried and said she had lost her daughter. "No," I answered. "You traded your daughter for an image. The image simply turned out to be worthless." My father called the next day. He did not apologize. He said I had punished them enough and asked when I would end the war. I told him there was no war. I was not attacking him. I had stopped protecting him. Their own choices had caused their fall. My victory was refusing to carry the consequences. After the deed was restored, I inherited Grandpa's workshop. It needed repairs, and the trust remained partly frozen. So I continued delivering pizzas for 6 months. During the day, I restored the building's windows. At night, I carried meals to students, nurses, mechanics, families, and late-shift workers. My father ranked people by occupation. Delivery work taught me how many invisible people kept a city functioning when the trust became available. I opened the Walter Collins Preservation Workshop. We repaired stained glass, digitized Grandpa's archive, and offered paid apprenticeships to adults changing careers. The program welcomed applicants without prestigious degrees. Paige became operations coordinator after cooperating with investigators. Vanessa helped organize Grandpa's letters, though I maintained boundaries. Apologies did not automatically restore trust. Noah became counsel for the Preservation Fund. His mother attended the opening beneath a restored Bluebird panel. My parents were not invited. They drove past anyway. A security camera showed their car parked across the street for 20 minutes. My mother never got out. My father stared at the visitors entering the building he had planned to sell. Above the door was Grandpa's name. Beneath it were the words, "A name means nothing without integrity." A year after Grandpa's funeral, I completed the largest unfinished window in his workshop. It, Snorts, showed a city skyline at dawn, assembled from blue, copper, gold, and clear textured glass. In the lower corner, he had sketched a small delivery car beside a row of houses. I assumed he had added it after learning about my second job. But the original drawing was dated 1989, 10 years before I was born. His notes described the vehicle as a symbol of service. Ordinary work performed while the city slept. My father saw a pizza box and found humiliation. Grandpa saw someone bringing what people needed to their doors. That difference captured everything I learned, for most of my life. I believed I could earn my parents' approval by becoming impressive enough. I enrolled in the business course they selected, attended networking dinners, and hid my stained glass sketches inside accounting books. Even after leaving, I hoped one prestigious commission or large paycheck would make them proud. The funeral demand exposed the trap. People who love only the version of you that improves their image never become satisfied. They simply raise the price of belonging. Had I paid $36,000, another test would have followed. Had I accepted their overseas lie, they would have forced me to maintain it. Had I stayed away, they would have sold Grandpa's legacy and blamed my absence on my failure. The greatest inheritance Grandpa gave me was not the house, trust, or archive. It was evidence strong enough to destroy the story my parents had written about me. They said I was irresponsible. Yet I worked 2 jobs while completing a specialist apprenticeship. They called me unambitious. Yet I spent years mastering a craft none of them had the patience to understand. They called me embarrassing while they forged documents, stole from an elderly man, fabricated funeral costs, and sold property before his burial. Their accusations were never descriptions of me. They were distractions from themselves. Some people ask whether I regret refusing to rescue them after they lost their home. I do not. Compassion does not require financing someone's refusal to accept responsibility. Forgiveness does not require reopening access to your money, home, or life. Boundaries are not cruelty simply because the people crossing them dislike being stopped. I did not celebrate my mother's isolation or my father's damaged career. Their pain was not the source of my peace. My peace came from protecting Grandpa's work, telling the truth, and ending the cycle of secrecy. Revenge felt satisfying briefly. Freedom lasted longer, 2 years after the funeral. My father mailed me a handwritten letter. He admitted that he had been ashamed of his own financial failures and projected that shame onto me. Every pizza box reminded him I had chosen an honest life while he built a dishonest one. He asked to meet. I did not answer immediately. An apology can matter without erasing consequences. Eventually, I replied that any future relationship required complete accountability, respect for my boundaries, and no requests for money. I offered one meeting in Noah's office. My mother refused the conditions. My father came alone. He looked older and less certain than the man who had screamed over the phone. Snorts. He apologized without blaming my uncle, my mother, stress, debt, or Grandpa's illness. I listened then, told him trust would not return after one conversation. I understand, he said. It was the first time he accepted my answer without attempting to change it. We are not a healed family. We may never become one. Sometimes growth leads to reconciliation. Sometimes it means speaking across distance. Sometimes it means walking away. The right choice depends on whether the person who harmed you wants transformation or simply relief from consequences. The Walter Collins Preservation Workshop now trains 12 apprentices each year. Some are graduates. Others are parents returning to work. Veterans, restaurant workers, warehouse employees, and delivery drivers. On their first day, I show them the Bluebird panel and explain how Grandpa hid his documents behind something everyone else considered decoration. Then I tell them never to assume quiet work has no value. An ordinary person has no evidence or patience means weakness. Never allow another person's obsession with status to measure your worth. A family name cannot make dishonesty respectable. A prestigious career cannot make cruelty intelligent. Money cannot purchase character, and public admiration cannot repair private corruption. The people who laughed when I said I could not pay $36,000 believed they controlled everything. 10 hours later, they stood outside my building begging because the daughter they considered unsuccessful possessed the truth they needed destroyed. I did not destroy them. I stopped helping them hide. Grandpa taught me that when stained glass breaks, You do not pretend the crack is invisible. You examine it. Remove what cannot be saved. Strengthen what remains. And rebuild the structure so light can pass through again. That was what I did with my life. I kept my craft, dignity, and the people who valued honesty over appearances. Everything built on manipulation, stolen money, and shame was allowed to fall. Your job title does not determine your worth, and blood does not give anyone unlimited permission to humiliate, exploit, or you. Real family respects your humanity even when your choices differ. Real love does not send an invoice. Real accountability does not demand immediate forgiveness. When people insist that you are the shame of the family, examine what they are trying to hide behind you. Sometimes the person they call a failure is simply the only one refusing to participate in the lie. Sometimes walking into the funeral they banned you from is not revenge. It is the moment you finally bury their power over you. We hope this story gives you both entertainment and something meaningful to think about. This is a fictional narrative created only for dramatic storytelling and education about Leo. We hope that it reminds you that not every person who loses you deserves a way back into your life. Some doors close because keeping them open would only allow the same pain to return in a different form.